Joel Lalgee and Marcus Sawyerr welcome you to AI in Recruiting, the show where they break down how AI is transforming hiring, leadership, and the future of work. Expect real talk, smart tools, and bold conversations with the people shaping what's next. Let's get into it.
Hank Levine, welcome to the AI in Recruiting podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Marcus. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Absolutely. Really excited to dive into this conversation. I know that you've been cooking up some brand new innovations, but other than that, you've been in the industry for a while. So you've seen a lot. We're now, as we've been discussing kind of offline, at somewhat of a tipping point in areas of innovation. So I think that the audience is going to be super excited to hear more about what you're up to.
I have been around a while and done some different things. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. And before being involved in recruiting for the last 20 years, I worked at a bunch of venture capital backed software startups. I was also on the very early bleeding edge of home automation. And my first job out of college, I actually did fusion energy research with a bunch of PhD physicists.
Wow. So you have got a variety of experiences. One of my favorite sayings is that I think you have to collect the dots before you can connect the dots. Mm-hmm. So maybe a topic for us to discuss offline, but I wonder how all of these different views and perspectives shape the way that you think about recruiting and business. If you think it must have had an impact, right? Exposure to different industries.
I really think it's very much the same as what's happening in AI. The future is so hard to predict. With AI, it's orders of magnitude harder to predict. And maybe the most important skill you have is flexibility, being able to adapt. And I always tell people with AI, there's in the recruiting industry, there are so many AI tools. There's new ones every week. We have an internal assessment team. We assess some tools are not very good, and I keep hearing about them. So I say 3 months later, look at them again.
Yeah,
they're really good now. It's like a new and so it's just changing so fast. And I talk to people all the time, and they just throw their hands up. They go, "I can't keep up with it. I'm too old for this. I can't do it." And I just say, just start.
Yeah.
Do anything. You'll never get the optimal decision. Just start. Try it. You'll make mistakes. You'll learn. You'll know it's good. You'll know it's bad. You know what you're looking for. But if you don't do anything, you'll get steamrolled.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think I didn't realize agility and flexibility was such a big skill. Like just coming up, it wasn't something that was taught, because I think maybe as a kid, you're told to kind of operate in a certain lane and in a certain box, and that's what you should be doing. But as you get older, and one of my CEOs that I really respected when I was about 23 years old, and I told him I really, really wanted to be a CEO. And he said to me, one of the biggest skills that you need to have, and the way he phrased it, was that you need to be a great generalist. I said, why? And he said, because you need to know a little bit about every single aspect. You need to know a bit about legal, you need to know about finance, you need to know about business, you need to know about technology, and then you have an area that you're really good at, and then you dive into that. And that always stuck with me as around, I'm a big believer in developing your strengths and doubling down on that. I think that's actually a really important skill. But I think the adaptability to the market and being able to weather a storm is super important. Hank, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about Be Additive and some of the work that you're doing there at the moment?
And so Be Additive is a global recruiting company. So we are working in about 30 different countries. We do staff augmentation. We do large hiring projects. We also do employer of record services. But what makes us really special are two things. We have a company that does software development, and we are developing a very, very cool AI talent marketplace. We also have two subsidiaries, one in India and one in Philippines. And so we have the ability to attract talent all over the world, and we have partnerships with a bunch of other EORs, which allows us to work in over 40 countries.
Amazing. Wow. That is some breadth that you have there, but it all feels like it's woven nicely together. So it's not by accident. So congratulations.
Yeah, it is woven nicely together, and you know, you you don't have to be that large of a company today to have a lot of scale. It's
Yeah.
very, and prior to this, I was the founder and CEO of a pretty large recruiting company. We had about 950 recruiters, and we were, again, working all over the world. And I had the advantage when I started this company is that almost everyone from my last company wanted to work with me. So we've got about a dozen people, all really good. There's no one in our company that hasn't worked with me for at least 10 years.
Amazing.
And so um, I know them really well. I don't have to get to know their skills and what they like and don't like. And we just dovetail nicely. And that's how we're able to set up these businesses almost overnight because these are all people who've been doing it for 10 years.
Fantastic. Look, I think it leads into one of the first questions that I have, which it seems like you understand the opportunity to be able to scale small teams, so becoming super efficient and super lean. So I
Mhm.
think outside of that, beyond efficiency, what role do you think AI should play in shaping how we think about the long-term workforce development?
Well, I don't really think I know the answer to that because AI is moving so fast. As I just said earlier, there's so many tools coming out, but it's not only moving fast in terms of technology, it's moving incredibly fast in terms of how it's integrated into society.
Yeah.
And if you look at the baseball game, we're in the top of the first inning. All right. So this game is not played out at all. So
Mm,
I think to predict where it's going to go is really near impossible. But what I do think it's absolutely near certain that AI is going to be everywhere.
yeah.
And if it's going to be everywhere, you got to get in front of it. You got to embrace it with gusto, and you got to be adaptable. So I kind of look at software development, and also what you said about career goals. No one develops software today where they write a 50-page functional spec and they just you know build build what's in the 50-page spec, right? Everyone, they do vibe coding, they do rapid prototyping, iterative development, and I think that's how you have to look at your career today because
Mm,
it's so unpredictable with the technology moving so fast. Companies' technology cycles are going to get shorter and shorter. Jobs are going to become shorter and shorter, and you just need to develop an enthusiasm for learning. You need to be a generalist, as you said, even if you're not a CEO, and you you need to move fast and take chances.
so I love this discussion around adaptability, and I think about agility. I actually think about a chameleon when I think of agility and just how they adapt to their environments, right?
Mhm.
So wherever they are, kind of change and shift. That brings me on to the skills that are going to be relevant in the future. So obviously we've got agility as one, but how do you think AI is kind of evolving that competition for skills, both on the side of those that are hiring, and then even if you're looking for a role, how you can stand out, right? Because I think that's also a little bit of a challenge that people struggle with.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an area that's going to be, again, hard to predict, but also very interesting. So people's profiles are going to become more and more public. It's going to be unavoidable. There's going to be very smart AI agents who are going to know all about you. And the more information you share with agents, the more it will be, the agent will be able to match you to the right job. But there's a lot of risk in sharing a lot of information, right? Because it can be used against you too. And I actually envision the day, I don't think this is so far away, where you're going to have AI agents interviewing candidates And the candidate's going to have his or her own AI agent, and it's going to be agent versus agent doing the first round of an interview. And so, how much do you want these agents to know? I don't know how society is going to adapt to that because it's going to help you become a perfect fit, but it could also really harm you if they know something about you and you have a employer with a certain bias who doesn't like that.
Yeah, that was my LinkedIn post yesterday. I called it A2A.
I like it.
So yeah. So I actually talked about agent to agent just yesterday, and I was thinking about the same thing. And the reason being, we know, and you've been in the industry for a long time, that AI has been around for a long time. With natural language processing, resume parsing, all of that type of stuff. Okay, it's been a little bit more embryotic, so to speak. But what we're starting to see is we're seeing candidates are jazzing up this resume and they're putting a resume forward, and the client has the right resume, but the wrong candidate. Okay. And then the client has a system which is trying to vet the quality of that resume. And I agree with you. I think that there's this, why don't you just get the agents on the phone? Like a Major League Baseball deal, like you mentioned at the start, or a soccer deal, whatever it's going to be. Let the agents thrash it out and then decide whether or not there needs to be a second step. And that agent's going to be programmed by the individual that decides in terms of what their preference are. Then there's no awkward conversations. So, yeah, I don't think we're too far from that.
And the industry hasn't quite figured it out yet. It's so easy to use an AI tool and source hundreds of candidates, send them all messages, have the AI personalize it. It's so easy for a candidate to research hundreds of companies and just send them all a resume. So there's just a lot of volume, but there's not necessarily the right solution to sifting through that volume.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point around the amount of data that's being created. So in every conversation, even this conversation, we're recording it, we'll transcribe it, we'll distribute it, goes into the cloud somewhere, somebody else gets a copy, constant data being created, less information, but a lot of data. And then you want to try and derive those insights out of there. But somebody who's hiring, you don't only need data, you need information and you need insights and you need some knowledge before you provide the talent to the client. And I think it's really interesting based on what we were talking about offline, is you have a lot of insights and information based on, is this person who they say they are because you've already vetted them? So this kind of goes into one of my questions is like, what are the problems that you think are still unsolved in the hiring process that AI could address, which people are not really thinking about right now within the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think this big one is the trade-off between having lots of information about you, very smart agents, and protecting privacy. And I really don't know how that's going to play out. Because to me, that could go in any direction. I also just think the whole way we prepare people for jobs is going to change. The way the schools we're working are going to change. I know a lot of educators, and I hear polar opposites from educators on how they feel about AI. Some just embrace it and they see individualized learning and isn't it wonderful? Others are really scared of it and they talk about it's ruining school. All the kids do is cheat.
Yeah.
You know, they don't learn how to think. They just put things into generative AI and get answers. And I think if you think that way, that is so backwards because that the world is not going to go back. And it reminds me of things you heard many years ago where people said, oh, calculators are bad because if we let kids use them in school, they won't know how to do multiplication and division. And I do think kids aren't as good at multiplication and division. Then you say you shouldn't have a calculator, or
Yeah.
same with like GPS. People say, "Oh, if we have GPS, people won't know how to read maps," and people don't know how to read maps. But I don't think the world's worse for having GPS. So I think in schools and I think in companies, AI is going to be embedded everywhere,
Yeah.
and you have to embrace it. And if you're worried about, I wouldn't do anything that slows down kids from learning. I wouldn't do anything that slows down employees from learning. And you learn how you need to run your business in a different way. You need to run your school in a different way so that however people learn with AI, you can still assess them. So rather than having them write a paper, have them do an oral presentation. If they get the information off generative AI and they haven't learned it, they're not going to be able to stand up with you and answer your questions.
It reminds me also as well. So some of the points that you mentioned, just the innovations, right? So when there's an innovation, whether it's the calculator or even the internet's a good example, where there was a lot of backlash with people using Google. Oh, are you cheating because you're using Google? A lot of backlash, and social media used to be banned. The recruiting companies used to ban LinkedIn when it first came out as well. So that with a new evolution that feels like a revolution, there's always some pushback. And then to your point, I feel like those that don't embrace it, if there's a big wave, if you don't know how to surf it, you're going to get hit by it. And you don't want to be hit by it in a blindsided way because that could hurt. What I would say is some people are just okay with being hit by it and they'll move on.
Yeah, I agree. They're going to get drowned by the wave. So it'll become natural. It'll become embedded everywhere. I mean, think of your cell phone. It
Yeah.
has there's an incredible amount of technology behind it, but you don't have to be a technologist to use a cell phone. You just download apps and press buttons, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I do think what you said earlier, just around like the education system, the evolution. And I grew up in England. I live in the US now, and I've got kids that are going through school. So we're constantly thinking about this and looking at it. And I know some of the faculty, and we've had discussions. And one of the takeaways that I have just from education in general, or also spending time with my kids, is I'm really focused on teaching them how to learn. So them figuring out how to learn, and then with AI, one of the biggest skills is critically thinking. So when you get an answer, where did that come from? Why did it get there? And going back to first level principles. And I think if you have a couple of good principles, you can pretty much adapt. I'd love your opinion on that and perspective, because it's just my thinking in terms of what's helped me progress.
That's exactly my opinion. So to prepare workers and to prepare students for the future, you need to teach them to be curious. You need to teach them to try new things. You need to teach them how to think.
Mm,
In schools and companies, need to validate that people are thinking correctly and then just cut them loose.
I learned a lot of that in software development, building systems, because I'm thinking about thinking.
Yeah.
And that becomes a meta view. It's like, well, in this scenario, what's the situational awareness? When we're building these AI agents, does it have phone? Does it have text? Does it have voice? Does it have email? Who's aware? So you're starting to build these worlds. I was talking to my son earlier today. We were having like a conversation around, he was leaving for school and he's 10. And I said, oh, daddy, they were talking about this thing called K-pop demon. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's big craze. And then there was a battle a while back, like Kendrick Lamar and Drake. And he was like, yeah, everyone at school's talking about. He said, no one's talking about K-pop demon now. I said, what are they talking about? He said, Roblox again. I said, why? He said, because they've got pets on Roblox. I said, what are they doing with these pets? I was asking, he was like leaving. I was like, what are they doing with these pets? He goes, the pets are infinite, Dad. He goes, so we can keep feeding them and we can continue to like figure out what they're going to do in life and how they're going to move. And what got me thinking about is moving for a system and how they're going to operate. The other thing it got me thinking was like, oh yeah, parents probably don't want kids to have pets anymore. So they're like, oh, phew, I haven't got to manage this one and my one. So there's kind of an evolution. But I think that systems thinking, the game playing, I see it a lot with kids that like to play games, understand how the systems work and create an environment. And that makes me think about software development and create an environment for yourself where you can be successful.
In technology cycles where we get collapse becomes shorter and shorter, social trends are going to collapse. You just have to be adaptable and iterate into everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not infinite pets.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe not infinite pets, right? Yeah, and I think just talking a little bit about the work that you're doing would be super interesting for the audience to hear in terms of the new innovation that you have. And as you mentioned, you're constantly evolving, staying ahead of the game. You're in multiple countries. So I'd love you to share a bit more about some of the work that you're currently doing as well, Hank.
Yeah, so the big thing we're doing is what we call an AI talent marketplace. And the problem we're solving is that, especially funded tech startups in AI, they have an incredibly hard challenge bringing in senior AI talent. First of all, there's much more demand than there's supply of this talent, and the salaries are unbelievable. They're off the chart, and as a startup, you're going, wow, how am I going to pay that? But you have VCs that are breathing down your neck. They want you to go fast, and so you have to bring the talent in. If you take a big gulp and you're willing to pay the salary, a lot of these people still don't want to work for you because they want to work for OpenAI or Google, and they can get paid even more there, and they get stock options, and there's more prestige. So it becomes very, very hard for these companies who have to go fast to be able to get the best talent and go fast. And probably something that's going to make that even worse is if this new law comes into place where H-1Bs start costing 100K to, per person that comes into the country, which I think is insane
Mm.
because half of the companies in Silicon Valley have been started by immigrants. So why wouldn't you want these brilliant people in your country? But beyond that, if that's the reality, this makes it just worse. So meanwhile, you see in a lot of lower wage companies, you see very brilliant technical people, and they're working for local companies. And these uh, AI professionals in these lower wage companies would love to work for a global corporation. One, they get a nice pay bump, right? They can generally get a 30% pay bump if they work globally, but really they want the exposure because it just puts their whole profile at a new level. So what we do is we build a two-sided marketplace, but we're building a two-sided marketplace to be more accurate because it's not done. And, uh, and companies will be able to post their jobs. We use a lot of AI to match them with long-term contractors from low labor cost markets, and they'll get employed by companies in high labor cost markets. So the companies in Europe and in the US, they will be able to hire people at one third to half the cost. The contractors and the lower wage companies, they'll get a nice pay bump, they'll get international exposure, and it works really well. We're already doing this in our company. What we're doing is productizing it.
Amazing. No, that's really interesting. And I think one of the reasons, obviously, we continue the discussion, as well as you having a wide variety of experience in the industry, a lot of knowledge, and the adaptability and innovation is we're kind of going on a similar track, but starting at different points. Because one of the things I found really interesting that you mentioned earlier was that the vetting that you do, the level of vetting, because there's one thing identifying the people, which is what we do. So we provide a platform, people can get access to intelligence to find these people in really, really hard places. But then the thing is, like, how do you know they're any good? And that's where we partner with companies and we partner with organizations to allow them to do that. It seems what you're doing is you're supercharging that part. So let's get these folks pre-vetted, make sure they're high quality. And then if it's 72 hours, like we discussed, we can get you in to the organization quickly.
And that's where we're working with beta customers because I will tell you that's one of our biggest trade-offs between automating everything in the marketplace so you go really fast,
Yeah.
but then having candidates that aren't truly vetted and so forth. So right now we are erring on the side of being high touch,
Mm-hmm.
and as we work with beta customers, we are going to figure out more what is acceptable to them in terms of automation. I think what you're going to see in recruiting in general is there's already a big trend towards marketplaces. You're going to see all kind of marketplaces for different verticals. in more less professional jobs, so to speak, maybe light industrial jobs, I think you're going to see nearly total automation. Because if the questions your recruiter asks is, can you lift 60 pounds? An AI agent can do it as well as a recruiter. You just don't need a recruiter. But if you're uh, talking to someone for a very senior AI position, a data scientist or something, I still think today it's really hard for a complete no-touch process to really understand if that person really is a good fit.
Yeah. No, we see the same. We provide AI agents that sit on job boards and job sites. They do first screen,
Mhm.
and their goal of that agent is to send them to a recruiter.
Yeah.
Maybe the next phase is the agent sends them to a marketplace, right? And I think that's where the evolution is going to be. But there's also these like kind of mid to senior level folks who you've mentioned that do expect a little bit more high touch. If they're in AI and they're senior, they're probably actually more likely to actually talk to the AI if it's any good because they're in AI. But if they're in financial services or maybe a different market or then healthcare, yeah, I've spoke to some folks in pharma that don't really like it.
Yeah, that's funny because sometimes people say like, how do you get your recruiters to be really knowledgeable in AI so they can go like toe to toe with these people? And I say, it's the easiest thing in the world. You're talking to the candidates who are brilliant in AI. Just ask them anything you want to learn about, and they'll teach you.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Well, Hank, I can't believe that our time's gone so fast. I've really enjoyed the conversation and discussion. As we start to get towards the tail end, is there anything you want to leave people with or any messages that you'd like to let the audience know?
Uh, Only that we're looking for two or three more beta customers for AI Talent Marketplace. Ideally, a funded startup is kind of our ideal profile. So if anyone is fits that and is interested in working very collaboratively with us and getting some great talent in your company, we'd love to talk to you.
Amazing. Well, Hank, thank you so much for sharing your insights, knowledge, and wisdom on everything related to talent, education, future of AI, being adaptable. It's been an absolute pleasure and looking forward to continuing our conversations.
Okay, well, thank you, Marcus. It's lots of fun being on your podcast.
Cheers. Talk to you soon, Hank.
Okay, bye.
If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in your network, your team, your boss, or that recruiter still stuck in 2015. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss what's next in hiring and AI. Until next time.